Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Hal Meng with the Center for Food Preservation Arts, and we're in the Defiance-Ruston Senior Center kitchen. And this is one of the series of classes that we are putting onto video to make them available to everyone through the whole COVID thing, but also for future reference for folks. So welcome. We still haven't come up. Right now the series is called Canning with Hal. And that's kind of fitting. I'm Hal and you're with me. So today what we're going to be talking about is asparagus. It's now June here in the Puget Sound area, the Seattle-Tacoma area, but in most of the country, asparagus has a very short season, April to June. So a little bit later than I wished we were getting this video out, but there's still plenty of time for you to go out and take advantage of local asparagus. Now, you can get asparagus year-round from other hemispheres, but nothing is as nice as a fresh batch of asparagus that you get locally. Basically, there are three types of asparagus. Green, which you're most familiar with, like Jersey King, some of those other cultivars. Purple, and then white. Now, white asparagus is primarily often just green asparagus that has been grown without a lot of light, much like folks in the Puget Sound. Asparagus is always best fresh, but if you're fortunate enough to have too much asparagus, you can preserve it in different ways. One of the easiest is freezing. Usually do that on a tray freezing, blanch it and freeze it on a tray, and there are other videos that go through that technique. You can also blanch it and dehydrate it in small chunks, especially if you're going to be planning to make some instant meals or backpacking meals, which is something else we'll be covering in other videos. But then you can also pickle it. And it's great for pickling. It's better in a lot of ways than cucumbers because it has a lot more fiber in it. So today we're going to be making spicy pickled asparagus. And it's cold packed, and what we mean by that is we haven't blanched it. It goes in just as it is. And there are two separate techniques for storing it. One is a refrigerator, which we're going to be making today, which is like it says, it isn't water bath canned, so you can't consider it shelf stable. The lid isn't firmly vacuumed down, but it will keep up to a month in the refrigerator, and it is the crispest of all, that method. Then shelf stable is where you would fill the jars and put it in a water bath canner, and we'll cover that in other videos. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we have a batch of nice fresh asparagus, all different sizes. That's how it came. And what we've done with it is wash it thoroughly. And you can, especially with refrigerator, it will shorten up the process and maintain even more of its crispness by putting it in the refrigerator instead of water bath canning. But all asparagus is very interesting. It tries to help you all it can. Now the bottom is usually very woody. It's getting a stalk so that eventually it would be tall enough to support the seeding. And so it starts getting woodier and woodier as you go up over time. So when you see ones that are this thick, you'll know that you're probably going to lose quite a bit of it. But the way that you find where it is that the tender part starts is just hold it gently and it will snap right where you need it to. Now the recipe that we're doing, and the one that we'll have links to on our website, It's a great recipe that has 3 variations in it. It gives you the instructions for the refrigerator and the shelf stable, but it also has 3 variations with slight changes in ingredients. It has a basic, which is quite plain, and then it has a bread and butter variation, which I hadn't seen before, which has quite a bit of sugar in it, like bread and butter pickles do. And then the one we're making is the spicy version. Now, all of the variations are based on increasing the acidity. And we're using, you can use apple cider vinegar if you want to play with different tastes, but we're using, just like the recipe says, white vinegar. But with the vinegars, the one thing you always want to be sure is that you're getting a 5%, and that's very clearly marked on any of the jars. If it's less than 5%, and there are ones out there that are called either like table vinegars or salad vinegars, they are maybe as low as 2%, and that will not be enough acid to be able to preserve. We make a brine ahead of time, which is basically the vinegar and a little bit of sugar in all of the recipes. The bread and butter, of course, had quite a bit more, and then salt. And it's just a little bit of salt to help bring out the other flavors. The salt is not a major preservative. And in any kind of canning like this, especially refrigerator, you also add water, but you should never exceed 50% water to 50% vinegar. And all of this is covered in pretty much all recipes. If you follow them, you're going to always be safe. So I've gone ahead and I've filled this one. And you want to leave about 1 inch of headroom in this recipe, which conveniently is this bottom rim on the jar, just above it. And so you want to figure out the approximate length you're going to need, and then you cut it to that length. Okay, I made that a little bit too short. So we're going to cut away for a moment, and I'll finish cutting all these and stuffing this jar. All right, and so we've prepared. You'll notice that these are somewhat shorter jars. They're 12 ounce. You can also use pint jars, which are the 16 ounce, and get more in, or they even, but they're a little hard to find, get pint and a half, which are quite long, and you can get more of the spears in. Difficulty with that word, it's like chivalry. It took me years to be able to say it. Get the spheres in. I don't recommend canning quarts of them, although some people still do. But the like Department of Agriculture is kind of out on whether you can get the center of the jars hot enough for it to be safe. Now, if you're refrigerator canning, that doesn't matter. That has a lot more leeway. So we're using the 12 ounce ones, and what we do, I don't know if you can see this quite well, we're getting them almost filled. And then you can put as much garlic in them as you wish. I'm sticking with the recipe, so it's 1 clove of garlic per, and then some very thinly sliced onions. And the amount is kind of up to you and what it looks like aesthetically. I just kind of go by a pinch, big pinch, lobster pinch. And then we go ahead and fit in a few more of these into the open spaces. Now, as you might have noticed, we had some cut-off pieces which are still good, and you can can and pickle the asparagus as inch-long pieces. Some people like that, especially if they're using it to put into salads and things so they don't have to cut it again. But that's a good use for the pieces you cut off. Now, what you want to do is make sure that none of it goes above that 1-inch level because you want them completely submerged. So we'll just take these unruly boys here and trim them. So I don't have a lot of experience with making videos or podcasts as an actual performer. So I've gone and been watching a lot of them on YouTube. And I particularly like the guy who does the painting, Bob Rossi, I think it was. I probably have slaughtered that name, but anyway, if I make a mistake, I will always say, there are no mistakes, they're just happy little accidents. I think he was a charming artist. So, once you have all your vegetables in there, they suggest for each jar, and because I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of these different spices per jar, but I'm going to do a slight teaspoon because that measurement is for pints. So I'll do like 3/4 of a teaspoon. These are 2 different kinds of mustard seed. Black mustard has a little more robust taste than the golden mustard, which is what ends up being made into like the yellow mustards, Frenches, things like that. And it has a little more mild taste. Then there is coriander seeds. And then something in this recipe gives you a lot of latitude, which it says you can put anywhere from 1 teaspoon of the chili flakes to 1 tablespoon of the chili flakes. I'm pulling it back to the same ratio, about 3/4 of a teaspoon. And then you shake them a little bit. And then we're going to cut for a moment, and I'll get the brine. I've had a chance now to heat up the brine, which, as I mentioned, is just vinegar, water, salt, and a little bit of sugar. You can vary the amount of salt and sugar, but never vary the ratio of vinegar to water. So we've got this nice and hot, and we've got our spices and everything in there, and we're going to fill up to that line so that everything that's in the jar is covered. And I've talked about this in other of these videos, but this is available a lot of different places. It's just called a canning ladle. Fairly new thing. The thing that's great about these is you can pour from 3 different angles, and it will hang on the side of the pot. Got just a little bit too much in here. Okay, so these are ready to go. If this was a water bath, we would be putting them in. We'd be sterilizing the lids. Always careful to wipe the rims, put them on, crank these on, and then drop them into the water bath for 15 minutes. That ensures they're heated all the way to the center, plus the heat pushes the air out so it forms the vacuum. That's what actually seals it. This is just, the ring is just to keep it in place until the vacuum forms and the rubber on the lid is cooled. But since these are going in the refrigerator, we're not worrying about that. And these reusable screw-on lids from Ball and Kerr and other folks work just as well. And so it's suggested, and I found, that you leave them in the refrigerator or after they're canned, leave them on the shelf for 3 to 6 days for all the flavors to mingle. So thank you for joining us in our virtual canning party, and I look forward to seeing you next time.